Hey, welcome. I'm Jennifer Randall Young, and if you found this show, chances are you've been Googling things at 2 a.m. that you can't say out loud to anyone else. This is The Life with an Alcoholic, a show for the woman who's been holding everything together while somebody she loves is falling apart. We don't talk about the alcoholic here, we talk about you. I'm going to give you real tools, honest conversations, and frameworks that you can actually use, whether you're staying, leaving, or just trying to remember who you were before all of this. Let's get into today's episode.
I know you've heard it. Maybe it was your sister. Maybe it was your best friend. Maybe it was a therapist who meant well but didn't quite get it. And it goes something like this. Why don't you just leave him? As if it was just that simple. As if your entire life, your history, your children, your home, your finances, your love, the version of him you married can just be neatly folded up and placed in a box. As if you haven't already thought of that. As if you haven't already run every possible scenario in your head at 3 a.m. while he slept soundly and you laid there calculating how much he had to drink that night. Just leave him. The three words that manage to be simultaneously the most well-intended and the most damaging thing somebody could say to a woman or partner in your situation. And today, we're going to dismantle that advice completely because you deserve so much better than a 3-word dismissal of your entire reality. Welcome to The Life With. I'm Jennifer Randall Young, and this podcast exists for one reason, to give you the tools, the language, and the clarity you need to reclaim your life without anyone telling you what to do with it. You are not codependent. You are not an enabler. You are not a doormat. Those words are retired here. And what you are is a woman or a partner who is navigating something deeply complex, deeply painful, and deeply misunderstood. And you are doing it largely alone because the people around you either don't see it, they don't get it, or think the answer is 3 words long. So today's episode is for every woman or partner who has ever felt that knot in their stomach when somebody says, just leave them. Because it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like another person failing to understand the weight of what you are actually carrying. So here's what we're going to cover today. So first, we're going to talk about why that advice fails you on every level. And then we're going to look at what is actually happening underneath the surface of your situation that makes this so much more complex that anyone on the outside can actually see. And finally, I'm going to give you 3 things that you can actually do right now this week that will move you forward regardless of whether you stay or go. Because both paths are valid and both paths are yours to choose. And neither one requires you to make that decision today. So part 1, why that advice fails you? Let's start with the obvious question. Why does just leave him feel so wrong, even when part of you knows things need to change? Because the wrong answer is the wrong question. People who say it are answering the question, is this relationship healthy? And the answer to that question might genuinely be no, but that is not the question you are actually living inside of. The question you are living inside of is far more complicated. It sounds more like, how do I survive today? How do I protect my kids? How do I keep the mortgage paid? How do I hold on to the version of him I know is still in there somewhere? How do I make a decision this enormous without any certainty about what comes next? Just to leave him does not answer any of those questions. It skips over all of them and lands on a conclusion without ever acknowledging the journey. And when somebody skips over your journey, what they are really saying, even though they don't mean to, is that your reality doesn't count. There are 3 specific things this advice gets wrong. And I want to name them really clearly so that you can stop internalizing them as failures on your part. And so the first thing it gets wrong is that it treats you leaving as simple when it is actually a very logistical and very emotional. Leaving a marriage, any marriage or a partnership, is one of the most complex things a human being can do. It involves finances and housing and children and legal arrangements and social circles and the complete restructuring of your daily life. When a partner is a functional alcoholic, meaning he holds a job and he pays the bills and he shows up in public and doesn't fit the stereotype of what people think an alcoholic looks like, the complexity multiplies because there is no obvious crisis moment. There is no rock bottom that everyone can see. There is just this slow grinding erosion of your peace that is very hard to explain to someone who isn't living through it. And leaving is not a simple decision. It is not a strategic one. And we need to be very strategy oriented. We need to have time and preparation. So leaving is not a simple decision. It is a strategic one. And strategy requires time, preparation, and clarity, none of which are delivered by a 3-word sentence. The second thing it gets wrong, it makes his choices the center of your story. Here's something I want you to write down or screenshot or tattoo on your forearm if you have to. His rock bottom is irrelevant to your healing. Just leave him is a sentence about him. It is still framing your entire future around his behavior. Whether you stay or whether you go, the most important shift that you can make is to stop making his choices the organizing principle of your life. Your healing does not depend on what he decides to do. Your peace does not require his participation. And your clarity does not need his cooperation. This is the thing that just leave him. That crowd misses entirely. They think the solution is about him. It's about removing him from the equation. But you are the equation. You are the one who needs the tools, the language, and a plan. And that is true whether you are staying or leaving. So the third thing that it gets wrong is that it ignores the grief. Leaving a marriage, even one that is hurting you, involves grief. Grief for the life that you thought you were building, grief for the person he was before the alcohol became the third person in your relationship, grief for the future that you planned together, grief for the version of yourself that you believed things would be different. And that grief is real. It is valid, and it deserves to be honored, not bypassed. So just leave him skips the grief entirely, and it goes straight to the action, which is why so many women who do leave feel completely blindsided by how complicated it still is emotionally after they are physically out. You are not weak for grieving. You are human. So part 2, what is actually happening that no one talks about? Let me tell you what I see when I talk to women in your and our situation. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about the version of the story that ends up being a movie or a memoir. I'm talking about the Tuesday afternoon version, the version where he goes to work and he comes home and he pours a drink and everything looks completely normal from the outside, while you sat across the dinner table running a silent calculation in your head. You know the one. We've all been there. What is actually happening is this. You're living in a state of chronic, low-grade hypervigilance. Your nervous system has adapted to an environment of unpredictability, and you have become extraordinarily skilled at reading a room, at detecting a subtle shift in his energy that tells you what kind of night it's going to be. You have developed an almost determined to manage, anticipate, and absorb. And that skill, that incredible, exhausting, invisible skill, is costing you almost everything. It's costing your sleep, your creativity, your sense of self, your ability to be present with everyone, especially your children, your friendships, your dreams. And because all of that energy is being funneled into managing someone else's chaos. So here's the truth that nobody says out loud. You didn't cause this, you cannot control it, and you cannot cure it. But you absolutely can build a life around it that protects you and your children. And you can start doing that today, regardless of what he decides to do. That's the third path that I talk about. Not stay and suffer, not leave immediately. The third path is reclaim yourself right now from inside whatever situation you are currently in. Build your clarity, build your tools, build your plan, and then from a place of ground rather than desperation, make the decision that is right for your life. That's what this podcast is about. That's what the Life With is built around. So part 3, 3 things you can do this week. I promised you some action items and I'm going to deliver those. Here are 3 concrete things that you can do this week, not to fix him, not to save the marriage, but to start reclaiming yourself. So here's number 1. Name what is actually happening. Not to him, not yet, to yourself. Get a journal, get your notes app, or whatever it is. Document, keep it password protected, and write down plain language your daily experience. What it actually looks like. Not the version that you would tell your mother, the real version. Not the one, just the one where you describe what it feels like to wake up and immediately start calculating. Write down what does these 2 things. It gets out of your head and it stops things from spinning in circles, right? It gives you a record of the reality so that when you can return to it, you stop doubting yourself, because this is how this part works. You start having your own records and your own words on paper, and this is really powerful. Number 2, identify one thing this week that is only for you. Not for kids, not for the house, not for him. One thing. Maybe it's a walk. Maybe it's a phone call with a friend that you've been avoiding. Maybe it's an hour or a half hour with a book. Maybe it's a class that you've been meaning to take. Something that belongs only to you. It's not self-indulgence. This is maintenance. You cannot make clear decisions from an empty tank. And refilling your tank is not a luxury. It's a prerequisite. So, number 3, stop explaining yourself to people who do not understand. This one is probably harder than it sounds. When somebody says, just leave him, the instinct is to explain to help them understand why it's not that simple. And I want to give yourself permission to just stop doing that. You do not owe anyone an explanation for the complexity of your life. A simple, it's complicated, is a full, complete sentence. Save your energy for the people and the work that actually moves you forward. So here's your quick win for the next 48 hours. I call it the reality journal. So for the next 2 days, every time you feel that familiar knot in your stomach, the one that tells you something is off, I want you to write down 3 things. 1, what just happened or what you just noticed. 2, what you told yourself about that moment. And 3, what you actually know to be true. So for example, he came home and poured a drink before he even said hello. I told myself maybe he just had a hard day. What I actually know is that this is the 4th night in a row that I have been holding my breath since 5 p.m. That 3rd column, what you actually know to be true, is where your clarity lives. And that clarity, as we say here, is the foundation for everything. Clarity without action is just anxiety. And action without clarity is chaos. And you need both. This exercise gives you the clarity. The rest of the work gives you action. So if this episode resonated with you in any way, and if you found yourself nodding along or finally feel like someone gets it, I want to tell you about the impossible choice. This is my flagship action guide, and I built it specifically for women and partners who are married to functional alcoholics and are done with platitudes. It is 6 modules and it's 6 gifts, I promise. And it's designed to give you quick wins in the first 48 hours because you have waited long enough. The impossible choice is not about telling you to stay or go. It's about giving you the tools, the language, and the step-by-step roadmap to make whichever choice you ultimately make from a place of clarity and strength rather than desperation and exhaustion. You can find it at thelifewith.com, and the link is also in the description below. You don't have to decide today whether to stay or leave. You do have to decide today whether to start reclaiming yourself, and I'm here to help you do exactly that. Thank you for being here, and I will see you.
Hey, welcome. I'm Jennifer Randall Young, and
that's a wrap on today's episode, and I hope something in there gave you a little more clarity, or at least reminded you that you are not alone in this. If you're ready to go deeper, I want you to head over to thelifewith.com. That's where you'll find the app and everything you need to start reclaiming your life on your own timeline.
I'm going to give you
And if this show has helped you, share it with somebody who needs it, because the woman who needs this most probably doesn't even know this show exists yet.
Who you were.
I'll see you next Tuesday.
Let's get
Take
into
care of yourself
today's
first.
episode.